So, this past week, sorry, we saw Inter beat River 2-0. It was a game that I watched live. Obviously, I was quite disappointed with the result. Obviously, with that result and with Urawa forgetting how to play football, they went out of the tournament. And I just wanted to go through the game, be able to understand what happened exactly, why River couldn't come out on top, even though I thought they didn't play terribly, right? Considering this as an Inter Milan team that just went to the Champions League final, who were my personal favorites to win the whole thing since like the quarterfinals, and who I thought was gonna win the final quite easily, right? So these are the lineups. This is basically how it would go on during the game, right? And immediately you can see a couple of things that are quite notable, especially how man-to-man the back lines are, right? So you have three Inter defenders going up against the River's front three, and then you have Inter's front two going up against the two center backs. And the big thing, whenever you're considering that, is that the game is gonna come down to those individual 1v1s. How they are gonna shape the game depends on how well those specific players play. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So Inter, obviously, they are a great defensive team, but I'll get onto that later because they are also incredible with the ball, and especially from deeper build-up because of the way that they play, right? So this is the 9th minute of the game, right? And the Inter have a goal kick here, right? Now, you might be looking at this and saying, oh, right, you have the back three plus the goalkeeper, then a couple of pivots, right? And then you have the front line of 5 there, right? You're overloading the defensive line. You're forced to drop deeper, and then you could have a free possession, right? That's not what happens here, because this is not the central center back. This is the central center back. This is the right center back. This is actually Eslani, the deepest midfield player. So what's actually happening here is that the back three turning into a back four is splitting like this, with the rest of the midfield dropping much deeper, right? So what this forces River to do is to push up a lot, right? So you end up having to go 6 for 6, or 6 for 7 rather, here, right? So you have these four, or rather it's the front three of Colidio, Borja, and Mastantuono, and the midfield three, right? Just to be able to press up and avoid Inter having very comfortable possession in the front. Now, what this allows Inter to do is to have 1v1s across the back line, right? So you have Esposito on Martinez Cuarta, Lautaro Martinez on Paulo Diaz, Di Marco on Montiel, and Dumfries on Acuna. And basically, now, what happens here, right, is that when the ball is played in the first place, right, the Inter players drop a bit deeper even, force pressure to come onto them, and then Sommer lets out a long kick, basically, right? Now this goes to Lisandro, and here I do think that Martinez Cuarta does make the right decision, right? That he follows Lautaro in, he tries to win the header, right? He tries to deny that easy possession that Inter likes so much, right? From the gaps that are left between the two lines of pressure, right? That left this whole midfield area, right? But the problem is that when you do that, right? These are the wrong side. When you do that, when you do drop deeper, then you're leaving a 3v3, which I think is worse than a 4v4, right? And then here is the big issue of the play, right? Because Paulo Diaz falls over here, right? And allows Esposito to have a bunch of space. And now the wingbacks are the only ones running onto the defensive line, which is good for Inter because the fullbacks are the only ones in the defensive line, right? So Esposito has time to turn around and find this pass, right? And then you have Dumfries, which is right over here, and Di Marco, which is down here, running at the defensive line, right? Now, here is where I do think there is a mistake, because the fullback doesn't have an immediate threat in behind in this central area, right? He should be going tight on Di Marco in this case, because there's players here to cover Esposito and Lautaro and Varela, right? But he doesn't. He gives him space, and Di Marco is able to get his head up and is able to at least try to find Di Marco on the back post, which is a run that if you watch the Inter play a lot, that is something they do all the time, right? So that is a really big threat, and that's how Inter end up being really threatening even from the back, right? You think most teams will carefully try to go slowly through the lines, right? Inter just go straight at the team, and because of the quality they have up front and because of the legs they have a wing back, they are able to get these kind of chances, right? Now you may be thinking, oh, that the best option is to go a little more passive, right? Instead of going full man to man, right? You let Inter have a little more space. You allow them to get the overload in the back, and you leave, for example, Craneviter here to be able to cover these deeper runs and simply block out the center, right? Now, obviously, for this, because there's wide center backs, you do end up having to put a little more pressure on them. So, but you may think, oh, Acerbi, right? He's the central center back. You don't have to put pressure on him, because if you're surrounding all his choices, then he can't go anywhere. But that's where Inter's brilliance comes in, right? So this is a situation where Inter just get the ball because of a loose forward ball from River, right? They have this 1+3, or rather 3+1 in the build-up that you would expect from them, right? But that shifts quite easily, right? So as the center backs drop deeper, right, you'd think that Acerbi would go with them, form back three or rather back four with Sommer, but he doesn't. He stays in a double pivot kind of, and creates a 3+2, which River is basically not ready for. And it means that you have to put pressure on Acerbi, which means that you are man down in the front, which means, you are you end up having to push more players forward, right? Now the Colidio starts putting pressure on Sommer, right? So Sommer picks up the ball, goes to Damian, right? But that doesn't end up working out, right? So he goes back to Sommer, and now, and this is the really brilliant part, right? This player is Acerbi again, right? Because Bastoni, I think, is either up here somewhere or it's this one. I really can't tell. The frame rate, the quality is not great in the US, right? But it means that now you have to put pressure on Acerbi, because if not, he can find the fullback, right? Overlapping almost, right? So Inter from the back end up having tons of options, tons of variations as to how they want to play, and that ends up forcing River to go more and more and more aggressive, which leaves them more stale almost at the back. Now, football is a two-sided game, right? You have your out of possession stuff and you have your in possession stuff. And even out of possession, Inter were incredible, right? So you can see they have this kind of two-man press followed up by a three-man midfield, and then you have the back five, right? You can almost just barely see Acerbi here on Borja, right? And what this formation ends up allowing you to do is that you cover the width, right? Because you have wing backs backed up by three central defenders. So you deny width, and you also deny depth, because you're covering the center incredibly, right? You have five players to cover usually a three-man midfield, right? So you end up having no spare players outside of maybe the fullbacks, right? But then the fullbacks don't have anywhere to go, right? And even when they shift more players out wide, Inter are amazing at just going out wide with you, right? So in this case, River are forced to go into the midfielder, who then goes back to the center backs. And this is the moment where Inter do actually go more aggressive, right? They go man to man almost. Well, no, they don't go man to man. They just go up and press the player on the ball, right? So you see the two center forwards pressing the center backs, and then surely right now Montiel is the free player. But they're amazing at just shifting over and now covering this area, right? Covering 2/3 of the pitch already, right? Because only this area is the one that's left now, and you're just not going to be able to find these kind of passes consistently throughout an entire game. So you can't just build your game plan around that, right? Now it may seem like, oh, Craneviter's free here, right? But then where does he go, right? Because Mesa looks like he's free here, but he's got Bastoni on him. And Aliendro looks like he's free here, but Barella is actually still staying on that side in order to jump on him, right? So Craneviter really doesn't have a choice. And even Mastantuono, who is out here, out wide, has Di Marco really tight to him, right? So Montiel doesn't have an option but to go long, right? And even here, right, you can see the Dumfries doesn't actually follow Colidia because now Darmian is following Colidia, right? Because Barella is on Aliendro. So Dumfries is now covering Acuna, right? And you have this really fluid man-to-man system almost when you're jumping forward, when you're forcing play to go faster than your opponent will want to, forcing them to make mistakes, forcing them to lose the ball, right? And this ends up only being a chance because Darmian loses this 1v1 and then he goes out wide to Mesa, who doesn't end up doing anything with the ball, right? And you can even think like, oh, just push Mastantuono further in and then like have some kind of brilliant rotation to find space out wide, right? But even then, right? So in this case, Di Marco is jumping onto Montiel, right? Instead of there being a central midfielder going out wide, right? Because I'm pretty sure they had more time on this side before switching it, right? But then, like, this midfielder knows Montiel is gonna get pressure right away. Knows that Mesa is way too high up. No, I believe that's whatever. The point is, right? There's no free player even here, right? Because now Mastantuono is covered by Bastoni, right? And then here, where you can see, right, Dumfries is covering Acuna while Darmian is on Colidia, right? While Borja is still on Borja is still being covered by a Cherry, and then the midfield is putting more pressure higher up, right? So there's really no way for you to play more consistently through the through opposition lines, right? Because Inter are so good at denying that kind of space. So what you end up having in these kind of games is scenarios where you just have to win your individual duels. And the truth is, River are not very good at that, and we're not very good at that against Inter, right? So you can see, right, another thing that's easy to understand, right, is that Inter play more directly, so they have less opportunities to lose duels, right? River want to play more patiently through the lines, having more players involved in each situation, right? Which ends up meaning that you have to do more duels, meaning that if you lose, you're more likely to lose one and lose the ball, right? And like even Inter had more recoveries here, right, than River. They won more tackles than River here, right? And that's why they won, right? Because they just won their individual battles, right? Now, obviously, they won up until the red card, right? Truth is, I don't know if it was only because of that red card that Inter ended up winning, but it was definitely a huge factor, right? Because after the red cards, when the 2 goals came, and where River just could not hold the pressure of their attacks anymore, right? So in this case, Inter have the ball, right? You have to see the front 2. There's the 2 wing backs, and I'm pretty sure at this point of the game, Augusto here. And then the midfield is come here to support because they didn't have to stay back as much because River are a man down, right? And so a couple of rotations later, I have no idea what his name is, but the number 8 has a lot of space here, right? And he's able to find Esposito here with after Pesela is forced to confront him, right? Because you're man to man in the back. I think that in order to put pressure on him, you have to jump out, leaves Esposito in space, and he turns and is able to get a shot off, which ends up going in, right? And then something else that Inter are very, very good at is using their wide center backs, something I didn't really cover because like it wasn't too relevant in this game, but it's super relevant to how Inter usually play. So these center backs end up having tons of responsibilities going farther forward, especially when their wing backs are pinning the opposition fullbacks, right? So Bastoni gets the ball here, and he's able to just drive with the ball, right? And one confusion between Borja and Pesela here allows Bastoni to go beyond them and score, right? So at the end of the day, this was a game where, as much as you would like to think, right, oh, in a better day, you know, River might have won this, right? They could have gone through. Truth is, I don't know if that was the case, right? Because Inter played this way because they know they can win their individual duels, and they just did, right? So it's very difficult to assess the game like that when you just know that Inter's game plan is to force River into a game plan that they're not comfortable with, right? Um, so obviously these are the. I just want to show right the rough structures here, right? So there's the Inter front two, right? There's the midfield three, and then the wing backs who are actually really high up, even beyond the midfielders, right? You would think that they'd be on their same line around there, right? But they're super aggressive with their position, and even Di Marco's average position is higher up than Esposito's, the center forward, right? And it's Inter is just a really well drilled team, even after Inzaghi's left, right? And it's almost like they were meant to win this, right? And even River, like they had to rebuild their midfield basically. The only player who had somewhat consistently played this season in the midfield was Mesa, right? But you had no Enzo Perez, you had no Castagna, you have no Galopo, right? Nacho really didn't play well this tournament. You just didn't have the players in order to play go up against Inter, right? So truth is, I don't know what's next. I don't know what's after this for River, right? Mastantuono, their best player by far, has left basically already to Real Madrid. And if you want to know what I think, right? I could tell you in a video, but I want to keep these videos on the YouTube channel a little more analysis focused, which is why I have a Substack, right? You can find it here in my YouTube channel, right? Right up here on the channel page. Right now YouTube isn't letting me link things in my description for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. So until then, it's only really going to be here. But I've already uploaded a couple of articles, right? I've talked about Castaño's importance to the team. I've talked about future transfers that River can do. And I've talked about, I forgot what else I talked about. Oh yeah, how I wanted River to line up against Inter. But if you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, right? It would really appreciate it. We're just starting this channel out, basically. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time River plays, which is in a bit. So, see ya.